Hey everybody, welcome back to Everyman Prepping. I'm Seth, and hopefully you are prepping as fast and as hard as you can. We're going to go through a couple news stories today. You're going to see what France is up to, what Dmitry Medvedev from Russia has to say in response to that, as also what plans are the U.S. doing? What are they doing right now that's kind of sliding under the radar? And finally, a court decision at home that's going to make you glad that you're doing your own defensive training right now. So we're going to get into that. But let's talk about France and how they're basically trying to get us all into World War III as fast as they can. I don't know why France is doing this, why they're either instigating it or they were the chosen one to instigate, why they're the ones that are basically trying to, well, get Russia to attack the rest of NATO. And what I'm talking about is you'll see here, this came out on French news, and they're talking about how France is going to send a couple thousand troops into Ukraine, basically. You got these two people here, and they're talking about, well, we got mean Belarus up top. You can see the English translation at the bottom here. Red is bad, of course. Blue is good, so I don't know if that has other notions as well, but red bad, so we got them up here. We got the good blue French here on the Dnieper River saying we're going to protect this side of Ukraine. We're not going to get involved in the fighting. We're just going to put guys here so, Russia doesn't come any further, protect the western half of Ukraine. So, they're talking about 2,000 troops. They're saying they're sending them. Some people are saying in France, not very happy about that, but it's going to be a huge trigger if NATO troops are in there because they're very close to the front lines. They're not sitting back here in Lviv, hanging out, doing some supply missions from Poland or anything. No, they're right here on the river, which is close to where, the battles are. We're battling down here between Ukraine and Russia, but, if you got them in this area, they're going to be targets. And how do we know they're going to be targets? Well, let's look at what Dmitry Medvedev has said. He's the deputy chair of the Security Council over there, basically Putin's right-hand man, still there after the elections, of course. So, of course, he wrote here, actually wrote in French here, but it's translated down below here. And let's read what he has to say about sending troops. He says, in fact, it would be helpful for the cause if the agitated French sent a few regiments to Ukraine. Use a different word. I'm going to translate that as Ukraine. Otherwise, no one will see this video. It would be very problematic to hide such a number of troops, and therefore their systematic destruction would be not the most difficult. So he's saying it's going to be easy to kill them, and it's also going to be an important task. So they're going to go after them. He says Russians will go after them if you put them in there. And then he also goes on, continue down here to say, with so many coffins arriving from France, from a foreign country, it would be impossible to cover up the mass deaths of professional soldiers. He said you'll no longer be able to use the excuse that, he says, for example, they're mercenaries that chose to go there on their own. He said, no, when, the unfortunate people will become full-fledged combatants of the intervention continent. Their destruction will be a priority and a glorious task for our armed forces. So, right now, basically NATO has troops in there under the guise of, special ops, black force, dressed as civilians, as mercenaries. Russia knows this. Ukraine knows this, NATO knows this. No one's bringing it up to the forefront because they know it'll make a full-fledged war. Well, when you got 2,000 French military dressed in French uniform soldiers over there and they start coming home dead because they were attacked, and the people in France, the word is getting out that, hey, our soldiers died over in Ukraine, well, that's going to create a problem. And he says he knows it's going to create a problem. He thinks, Dmitry here says, it's going to be a lesson for other ruthless morons of Europe. So, long story short here, Dmitry Medvedev says he wants them to, France, go ahead and send them in there. They're going to be a huge target. You won't be able to hide them as you do now under the fact of mercenaries. You're not going to be able to hide it anymore, that NATO is actually involved. And then, Russia's going to take them out and send them home, and we'll see what happens to your country. See if your countrymen, rally against that decision and, stop it, or do they rally against it and send more? But seems like Dmitry Medvedev is all ready for World War III and France send them, and it looks like France is going to do it. So we shall wait to see. But that, will be the next step towards NATO fully involved. Moving on from there, we see this report. Now this is from Romania. It's about the U.S. sending 3,000 pieces of armor and equipment over into Greece, a Greece port. So let me just switch over really quick. We're going to switch to a English translation of this so we can actually read this thing here. So it says here, U.S. heavy infantry armor, Southeast Europe. Thousands of combat assets, Abrams tanks, Bradley vehicles deployed by Americans. So here you see a bunch of Bradley vehicles being offloaded. This happened on March 11th. 3,000 pieces of heavy equipment, including Abrams tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, and so forth. Here you see him strapped down. Here you see him craning off Abrams tank. And then it says here, the equipment will be transported to multiple locations to quickly generate combat power to deter potential aggression and reassure NATO allies. So, these landed in Greece. Now, I'll bring up a map in a minute, but 3,000 pieces of equipment in Greece. No one's talking about it. France has said they're sending troops into Ukraine. Well, what are these going to be used for? And we're going to look at a map, and I'll give you some ideas in a minute, but this needs to be talked out as well because the U.S. is ramping this up. You don't think, with all the Russian satellites and spy, they don't see that a whole brigade has showed up over in, Greece, basically. Let me switch back here to our other channel so I can show you a map. Let's go here, and then we're going to go here. All right, so this is where they're offloaded. This little port here, so this is Greece. It says, Greece here, Turkey here. And this here, it's Alexandropoli is where they offload them. But what's more important is it's really close to Bulgaria, NATO country, and which is right underneath Romania, a NATO country. Well, what do you know? You got Moldova here, Transnistria, with that huge weapons ammunition depot right about here. And then, there's Odessa. This is Ukraine. So we have 3,000 brigade dumping off right here, short distance just to hop into Ukraine and go into Odessa or go into Transnistria. Very short distance. A lot of armor. No one's talking about it. So why the Americans put it there? Are we planning something? We just bolstering NATO, or is this to prepare for what eventually everybody thinks is going to happen, that the war is going to expand? By the way, remember we sent 31 Abrams to Ukraine? We couldn't get them there. It took like a year. It's hard to get 31. Well, Brigade has about 90 Abrams. Well, they got 90 Abrams there in about a month or so, offloaded them all, no problems. So if we wanted to send Ukraine hundreds of Abrams tanks in a short time, we could, no problems. Problem is maybe who's driving them, who's trained on them, but they can get trained up. They'll probably put, quote unquote, mercenaries in there. So the fact they only sent 31 means they probably don't want to give them to Ukraine to get them destroyed. They want to keep them from themselves when the war expands, and they're going to use them themselves. So that's the state of the war going over there. We got to keep an eye on the next few days, because not the next few days. Probably France and their decision, the movement of troops will take probably a few months. I don't know the time frame. We'll see what happens, but it's definitely not calming down. And these troop movements are a huge indication that it's going to get a lot worse. And thus, prep on, people. Keep on prepping. Moving on that to the home front now. Something else we need to prep for here. So, you probably, I don't know if you heard about this, but just the last few days, a judge said that illegal immigrants can carry self-defense tools. I'm not going to say that word right there, and you can see them here because we live in a stupid world, and if you say that, YouTube gets mad and no one sees your video. So, basically, if you have these self-defense tools that Americans have a hard time getting them, they got to go through background checks in most places, and they got to go through the whole rigmarole, the waiting periods in some states. Some states I know you got private transfers, some you don't. But according to a federal judge, illegal immigrants can have their own now. So remember, we, through the southern border, we have hundreds of thousands of young, healthy, fighting age males. And now judge says, yes, they can have a defensive tool. They can do it. They can have them. They have Second Amendment rights. We can't repeal that. Now, why someone who's came here illegally, an illegal alien, not a citizen, has constitutional rights? Doesn't make sense to me. Maybe you can put in the comments below what you think what the reason is that, but that's what they're saying. They have a Second Amendment right, so they got to have the right to have their own defensive tool. Now, we know that people here that have domestic violence charges, federal offenses, convicted felonies, they can't hold these tools. They can't have them. But yet, an illegal alien who broke the law, is here illegally, can't have them. I don't know if the judge is saying, well, they've been charged with that crime, but they haven't been convicted because, their court date's 7 years away because the immigration courts are so impacted. So until they get convicted, they can have one of these. So doesn't make me feel safe at all. I don't know about you guys, but this is a very decision makes you wonder, who's in control, who's pulling the strings, and why would you do this? So hopefully you're doing your own training. You have your own defensive tools because, crime's probably going to go up. Violent crime will probably go up. Who knows what else will happen? Maybe there'll be some of those sleeper groups that we can't say the other word because YouTube doesn't like that either. But maybe there'll be some groups that sleep a lot that waking up because now they're allowed to have a defensive tool and they want to, do stuff. So just do your training, have your own defensive tools, have your ammunition for it, all that good stuff. Make sure you're prepared because we have this at home, and then abroad we have probably an expanding war. And of course, no one's talking about China. They've been very quiet, still doing their, their incursions and all that, but don't sleep on China. It's not like they've given up or anything. When they go quiet is more when I get more concerned, I should say. So that's all I have for you. If you've been here this far, that's great. Please like, share, comment on the video. And until next time, keep your ear to the ground and head on a swivel.